Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted you all made it today, and we think we have a very special presentation for the final presentation of the Holocaust and Genocide lecture series this semester. And here to introduce the ambassador and her distinguished entourage, we have our equally distinguished Dean of the School of Social Sciences. Welcome, Professor John Wingard.
Hey. Good afternoon. We do have a very distinguished speaker this afternoon, and so you'll have to excuse me. She has earned many very critical, important accolades, so I'm going to have to use my cheat sheet so I don't miss any of them. So it is my honor to welcome Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Rwanda, Mathilde Mukantabana. Ambassador Mukantabana has been a featured speaker in this lecture series for several years. She is a member of the board of the Center for the Study of Holocaust and Genocide. Prior to her current position, she was a highly regarded professor of history at Consumnes River College in Sacramento. She has been a dedicated community organizer and activist for decades and has done tremendous work to further genocide education. She is co-founder and president of the Friends of Rwanda Association, dedicated to supporting survivors of the 1994 genocide. Among her many acknowledgments, she received the 2012 Peace and Justice Award from the Center for African Peace and Conflict Reconciliation and the Global Peace Award from Global Majority. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Mathilde Mukantabana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dean. Good afternoon. Is this? I was looking for my assistant, but not assistant in the real sense. Oh, okay. So can you put it on, please? Thank you. I want to start by thanking again Sonoma State University. Thank you. And all the friends at Sonoma State, thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dr. Diane, Myrna, Barbara, Hans, all the people who have been part of the Holocaust and Genocide series. And it's always an honor and a privilege for me to come back here at Sonoma State University because it represents not just any institution. You know, Sonoma State holds a very special place in our history as Rwandans living in California and beyond. And I'm here to attest that all I have become also Sonoma State has a big part in it. I thank you especially for sustaining FORA, Friends of Rwanda Association, an organization that many of us are a part of, that has helped in the recovery of Rwandans after genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Christine, I didn't even see you. Thank you. Okay. Again, friends always come at the most difficult times, and Sonoma has been part of us. In Rwanda, as you know, we place the act of memory at the heart of our civic life. It's a national project aimed at reckoning honestly with our past. And each April 7th, the day when persecution against Rwanda's Tutsi exploded in full-blown genocide, our nation mourns as one. So for the last couple of months, we started the month of mourning that will end in 100 days because genocide in Rwanda took place for 100 days and more than a million people died. We remember because unity and renewal first demand an honest reckoning with the past. It was only this, and this is very important for me, maybe as students we'll have a chance to discuss, but after many years of agitation, of education, of many different things, it was just this January the 13th on Friday that the UN General Assembly in New York accepted to say that it was genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. It took 24 years. within the walls of the United States. So we're there. And this is a major development because I needed to tell you that the resistance to use the word genocide against the Tutsi also has helped denial of that genocide. Because when you say Rwanda genocide, what genocide is that? Who is in Rwanda? Who is that? And when we name it, it doesn't mean that the Rwandans are not part of this picture. But we needed to deal with the past in order to move forward. Many people in Rwanda died in 1994 and after. But the targeting of the Tutsi of Rwanda has started decades before. It was a periodic massacre that took many of us in foreign lands until finally the genocide took place. That was meant to finish off all the Tutsis in Rwanda. Whether they were children, they were women, they were men, it didn't really select anybody because they were Tutsi. And other people who stood up, other people in Rwandan society, whether they were Hutu or Twa, also were killed. They became the casualty of one of the most horrible genocides in history in the 20th century. Genocide was committed by Rwandans to Rwandans. We soaked each other in blood. And the genocide against the Tutsi has just have become to symbolize a failure also on the part of the international community. Its inability or refusal to stand up for our shared humanity as people. But we have hope because you are here. You know, teaching genocide studies by itself is a major development. You know, to come and talk about the evil and to try to find ways to fight against genocide, wherever it is. I needed to tell you that sometimes we focus on the 100 days beginning in April 1994 because of the magnitude both in scope and cruelty. However, 1994 was not a beginning but a culmination of decades of discrimination, oppression, and violence directed against the Tutsi of Rwanda. And it wasn't, as some would have you believe, a sudden or unpredictable eruption of mob violence. For decades preceding the tragedy of 1994, the humanization aimed at the Tutsi population laid the groundwork for genocide. And the anti-Tutsi propaganda permeated all the major institutions. And when I say major institutions, it's not just the state, it's not just the media, it's also the church. And I wanted to show a couple of pictures and then take you from there just to show where we have been. These are the images. I was trying to, this is horrible, but it doesn't show the extent to what we are talking about. A couple of months ago, when we started April and the commemoration, I think Ndahiro posted on his Instagram in remembrance, and it was a whole monument for their whole family, Simon and all the people sitting here, Jackie, you know, where all the names, their parents, the young people. And then you go to another memorial on the school ground, you find 400 women, their mothers. They are all in the same place. So that I couldn't put it in here, but you have, the machetes were the perfect weapon for genocide. And for us, memory, when you go to any memorial, if you go to Kigali or other places, actually the one in Kigali is a little bit more palatable. If you go to other ones, you find the names, you find people, you find sometimes the voices of these people. These are images. These are people who were laughing. Some of them were really finishing up their school. Young children. My youngest sister, who was 18, who just got a scholarship in the US and died while she was coming. All the people were people with stories. And there are more than 1 million people in that genocide. Today, we don't, you know, we take the time to remember them because it's also about respect. It's also about coming together as people because, you know, when you lose somebody, the only way to heal is when people come to visit you. They are there every time. for most Rwandans, they were left without any kind of social outlet, where people usually, in a normal equation, people come when you lose people. But if you lose 70 people, and your neighbors maybe are part of the killings, who are you going to call to be with you when you lose somebody? And maybe you'll also appreciate what I was talking about when I mentioned Friends of Rwanda Association and the part Sonoma has played. Because even the association became like a surrogate family. You know, people came together, they were able to talk about healing, but also form communities, like surrogate families. You know, again, maybe Chiaya can help me with this, but I was going to show you a school. There was a school in Mayaga. You know, when we started, it was a relief type of school, very small. That was helping mostly the children. You know, because you can find like a 9-year-old taking care of babies because everybody had died. That region where we come from in the south, almost all the Tutsis died because in the past when there were killings, usually people were able to stay together. So this time they had a false sense of security. Until they killed the mayor, they killed the governor, then people started to kill again. So more people died in the region. And what happened, we also have many young people who were surviving, the ones who went to the forest, the ones who could, you know, who were under the bodies of their mothers or whatever. So when we went there, the first time when we started the Friends of Rwanda Association, it was to deal with the children. Now the school has grown enough to become accredited by the state. It's a vocational school, but that has helped tremendously. And Sonoma has been helping all these years. You know, so I needed to tell you, as we talk about reconstruction and rebuilding and renewal, yeah, Rwandans have done it, but also you have to count for the amazing partnerships that we've gotten, some of them from here. So it's quite something that I wanted to show you. This is the president of Rwanda, and everyone, when we start, as I said, it's a national morning. All over the United States and all the countries in the world, we do the same. It's a time to come together. It's traumatizing, but it's better than not remembering. So we are together. Especially, as you know, no one knows better than the pain of genocide than survivors. You know, Simon will tell you, it's not an easy thing to do. But at the same time, being able to tell the story also has helped in creating also some basis for trying to limit genocide, wherever it is. At the end of genocide in 1994, 1995, the nation had to start to live again. People had to rebuild from the ashes. And as I said, major institutions had failed. I want to show you a picture maybe to understand what we are talking about. This is Rwanda now. They try to come together as people. This is a very important phenomenon. That is the basis for our reconciliation and for people to try to come together. What is known as Ndu Munyarwanda and Rwandan, that is now, it's a homegrown initiative to say people went and killed each other because of ID cards. You know, I mean, if we had one, it could make you killed. You go to the roadblock, they see your identity, you are killed. And sometimes it saved your lives if you had another identity. But we've decided that, at least for now and for future generations, and they find their own ways to deal with it. But for now, we want an identity that is addressing everybody. Not saying that you can't understand who you are, but all the opportunities, all the chances, all the protection have to come because you are a Rwandan, not because you are a Hutu or a Tutsi or a Twa. And it has resonated especially with young people, because some of them have inherited a horrible legacy. You know, if your father was a killer, you don't want to carry that legacy forever. You didn't kill. They were victimized as much as the people who lost their parents. So we don't want our children to be born and to again inherit a horrible story that was started during colonialism until today. So that is something, and we also had the prerequisites. We talked about the justice system that was also homegrown. When people came and they judged their fellow, they atoned, they asked for forgiveness, they served their prison terms, and they are back to rebuild their nation. So that has allowed Rwanda to move forward. And also the other creation like National Unity and Reconstruction Commission. That is in all sector of government, whether it's top or even in the villages, they have those kind of stuff. And peace building at the community level is very important. And it's not just to go and say, hey, we are teaching you peace, or we want you to reconcile. No. Our socioeconomic initiatives are meant for that. We are talking about all the homegrown initiatives, Moganda that I show you. This is a part of the other part of reconciliation, by the way. The main reason I put this picture is I was mentioning one of the institutions that most Rwandans trusted more than anything, the church, because the majority were Catholic. But the church was complicit in genocide in Rwanda. As a matter of fact, the majority of the people died in churches. It took 23 years, because this was last year when the Pope invited the president to come, and now we've turned a page. It's about facing the history. And when we say facing the history, it's not just individuals, it's also the institutions, because the institutions were part and parcel of genocide and what was taking place. So I was mentioning some of the programs that have brought people together without being an imperative. Like Umuganda has made Rwanda what Rwanda is today. It's a community work that now if you go in your news, you'll find Rwanda is the cleanest nation. It's not because anyone is forcing. It's because the people, every Friday, they build roads, they beautify the neighborhood. If you go there and you find a plastic bag on the floor, that's a failure from any community, because we are also very conservation conscious, because we are a small country and thinking in terms of what is tomorrow. But on the day of Umuganda, people see it, whether you are a president, whether you are a mayor, whether you are someone who is a priest, everyone work together. In each region, they look at the programs, they look at whether it's a school that needs to be fixed, whether it's the neighborhood where you need to plant trees, whether it's to build the road, and then they'll go and do those things. And that has brought many people together, many. And we have, for instance, one example I always mention, and I think I've given you one gift. It's the basket, what they call the peace basket. It's an economic initiative, but it brings people together, because they bring people of women who have lost their husbands and women whose husbands have killed, and they weave. Weaving takes a long time. You know, even to finish one basket, it takes a long time. It means that by sitting, by understanding that they have the same, you know, existential problems, eventually they become friends and they start talking. We have many, many of these that I'm not going to talk about, because obviously I wanted the young people to talk, but also we can expand on questions. But Rwanda has recovered, or at least it's we are on the road to recovery. And I can give you a couple of indications that we are recovering. If you look at one of the least corrupt in the world, I think we are number 2. Where women are represented in the government, we are number 1. Where you talk about even the community leader, you know, in our parliament we have 64% in the parliament, the highest in the world. And we have also other things that are showing that Rwanda is recovering. And that's why the biggest indication is that we are also developing economically. Without that kind of recovery and people coming together, working together, we wouldn't be where we are. Now it's the destination. You know, now as we speak, we have about 5,000 people coming just for technology in the whole continent of Africa. You know, what they call Transform Africa is to look at how technology can also change many things. And the second thing is, you know, my president was selected to be the one doing reforms for the whole continent of Africa. He was selected by his peers, not because they love him, it's because of what he does, what he has done for a country that, where people were predicted that will be forever a failed nation. And you turn around, you find that actually in Africa it's doing better than most. And it's not in essence, I'm not saying it just to show that we do better than other people. I'm just saying that even after genocide, there's hope. It's better to prevent. But if there's any place where you can show that even after that calamity, people can still build, it's Rwanda. Because we've taken the chaff and the grain and the bad, the ugly, and we were able to mold a society that is functional. So I believe that that has been also an inspiration for people who are studying those things. If you go to Kigali now, it's an image I want you to have, and I hope many of you will go. Every Thursday you have a place for poetry. Young people who are competing, they've studied what they call the Geek Africa. Now it has taken all the continent, where they show it's not just to talk about Miss Africa or Miss. Why don't you talk about people in science and technology who are girls? This has inspired many women. And, our first CEO in our airplane that is coming to New York next week is a woman. She's the one who is heading it because they have been allowed to go into technology, into science. So the door has opened, and I believe that you can't really fully appreciate how it was taken without thinking in terms of really dreaming something better. Dreaming something better and then put it into a vision for a whole country and more possibly for maybe a continent. Rwanda is among the first peacekeeping country in the world. We are in Central African Republic, but because there are many women who are in peacekeeping, it has changed the face of even what we call peacekeeping. Because I have to tell you that when genocide happened in Rwanda, they were peacekeepers. For a long time, in Congo we have about 20,000 peacekeepers. But is there peace? When you are a peacekeeper, what do? You prevent people from dying, or you prevent people from, being killed. So these are people who are changing the face of peacekeeping. They've actually done, in New York now they have that, what they call the Kigali principles, that have been adopted by more than 42 countries, including the United States, on how to do peacekeeping and peace building, not just to go and be there and protect your own peacekeepers and the people die, when you are in the stuff. So this has changed. Like in South Sudan, just to give you an example. In South Sudan, women were also raped because most of them were trying to get the wood, they were trying to get water. But these are the people who usually, when they go there, they've created a covenant with those women where they build stoves, cheap stoves, but also can go with them when they go to fetch the water. And that has helped them to, even in the face of conflict, not to be victimized more than they should. So this is about reconciliation, but also to see the new face of Rwanda. Before, no woman could beat the drums. That was reserved for men. But these girls came together again to try to reconcile some of the young children who were coming from the two parts. And now they have become the elite drummers. Actually, they were in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken, because they've changed the face of this. I invite you to come for the naming ceremony. Conservation is big for the people and for the animals, because if you are, one of the most biggest attractions for Rwanda is the gorillas, where people have conserved the majority in the world. And there was a big facilitation when they said that Ellen DeGeneres was able to give some more money to do that. So I'm going to leave it up here. Maybe we'll continue with the questions. But I wanted to say I'm with Simon and then with Ndahiro, and these are people who will tell another story. Ndahiro was born here. He was not in Rwanda when genocide happened. Simon was in the middle of genocide. These are the two young people who tell another story, but also who give us the courage and the hope that the memory will be preserved, but also the new future is being built as we have the young people who are pushing for our history, but also for connection with the people who fight against the genocide. So thank you so much. And again, I want to thank Sonoma State. It's always a pleasure to come back here, and I see all the friends here and our families are here. You know, they've come from a long way. The people who have taken in children, you know, I see these and these are the people who stood with us. You know, they heard there were children who didn't have families. They didn't hesitate to bring 3 children, and some of them are here. There's Denise and then Simon. These are kids who were traumatized, who didn't speak any English, but they've created amazing human beings because of, again, to expand and to say this, you know, we are all our brother's keeper. And as long as we don't bring any solidarity in the fight against the genocide, it will never end. So thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here again. It's always nice to see so many faces. I want to start today by asking everyone a question, everyone in here. Have you ever had a dream so bad that in that dream, you lost your whole family in one night? Or a dream where you had to watch your best friend kill one of your family members? Or a dream where you're left alone with your siblings and you're so young and you have no one to turn to. But then you woke up and realized it was just a dream. For me, it was never a dream. My name is Simon, and I'm a genocide survivor. April of 1994, that's when it all began. I was 10 years old. I remember sitting around a fireplace, listening to stories from the grandparents and parents, and also listening to the news. The news was about a war that was happening in the northern parts of Rwanda. At that time, it was the army, the RPF army, fighting against the Rwanda's army. This war has been going on since 1990, but has not yet made it to the southern provinces. So most of us were convinced that it will never make it to a village. And our parents made sure that we were convinced that it will never make it to our side of town. Then we start seeing signs that we could be next, but we ignored them. Again, as the ambassador mentioned, in the southern provinces, you know, whether you're a Hutu or Tutsi, everybody got along. You know, everybody was like a family. Soon, we start hearing helicopters flying around our homes in the area. So they were flying so low that the houses were shaking. We had no idea why they were flying that low. We had no idea why they were flying in that particular town, that village. Most of us never seen an airplane in that area. You know, any airplanes we ever saw were flying so high, going somewhere else. And most of us were convinced that they were dropping off the army, but we never actually got to see them. Not long after that, we start seeing our Hutu neighbors, you know, all day just walking up and down the street, almost like they knew something we didn't. You know, but then again, our parents were so convinced that nothing will ever happen to us, that we know our neighbors so well. Not only they're our friends, but if anything did happen, they will protect us. that they would never kill us. I remember one night, a family's friend, they stopped by our house. They were fleeing from Kigali, going to Burundi. That's where the refugees went, if you were lucky to make it there alive. This family was in terror. They were terrified. They continue on to go to Burundi, but again, my family didn't. We were convinced that nothing will ever happen. At that time, schools up north were closed due to genocide. But in the south, we're still forced to attend. In school, it was a constant struggle, a constant harassment. All the Tutsi kids were harassed. They were beaten. The teachers did nothing about it. I remember one of my classmates, Hutu classmates, telling me that I was going to die soon. And then I went and told my teacher, and my teacher's response was, "Go sit down." On the way home, we couldn't take the normal route that we usually take. We had to go through the fields and hoping that no one would see us. If you were seen, rocks were thrown at you, were chased down the fields. If you're not fast enough and you got caught, you were beaten. Before long, people start dying in our village, but only at nighttime. The killing was not yet permitted in the village. So every night, we will go and stay the nights in the forest. And then what we heard was, the killers looking for us. They will go and search the houses. They will take all our belongings. And once they couldn't find us, they went searching in the forest since they knew that's where we were hiding. We had to be so quiet. The only thing that we could hear was just their noise, frogs, and the crickets. On April 6th, my sister and I were sent to the border of Rwanda and Burundi to see what was happening. The rumor was that the army killed anyone who tried to cross the border. The plan was for the two of us to go survey the border and come back and report to the parents. While we were doing that, the parents were supposed to try and sell everything that we had so we had money once we got to the camps. After traveling all night, my sister and I, we finally made it to the border. But by the time we got there, things have gotten worse. We could see houses being burnt down, men, women, children crying in the distance, wounded people rushing to the border, corpse floating down the river. We were forced to make a decision, and the decision was go back to our parents and die, or cross the river and live. That night, we stayed in the swamps, and the next morning, with help, we were able to cross the border and made it to the refugee camps. After a few days in the camps of cold and starvation and searching for our parents, we learned that they have been killed. This was the first day that I considered taking my own life. My first rescuer is my sister. She has always been there for me, to talk to hang out with, to talk some sense into me, to make me realize that there's always a better tomorrow, and most importantly, save my life. She was there by my side, especially those times in need, and it is because of her that I'm here today. Right now, I'd like to introduce you guys to my sister. Stand up, Regine, please. Life in the refugee camps was hard. We did not have any clothes, nor food to eat. We had one small tent and a small blanket for which my sister and I shared. not enough toilets, so people went to the bathroom right outside your tent. We starved, we cried, we prayed for a miracle. Every day, I'll go to nearby farms and search for food, but many times I came back empty-handed. We lost faith. We were raised to believe that God is good all the time, that God is powerful and watches all his children. We went to church every Sunday. It was hard for us to comprehend that God, who controls everything, the living and the dead, can allow something so disastrous to happen. Eventually, we came to accept the fact that we're alone and that it was time to grow up and to learn how to survive. The genocide ended, and with help, we were able to come back to Rwanda. This is when our prayers were finally answered. 2 of my aunts came to visit from America, and both promised that they would do everything in their power to try and bring us to America. Through their hard work and FORA, Friends of Rwanda Association, we were both adopted. You two are my rescuers. With countless hours you spent on the phones, calling whoever that you could to try to get us here, making the connection with our new parents, flying back and forth to Rwanda to check on us. We thank you for that. And then to my other aunt, Jackie, you've been through so much as well. You survived the genocide, and you had to step up and be our mom. And for that, we also appreciate you. Now I'd like to guys to meet my aunts. Jackie, Mathilde. Is it Josie here? Is it Josie here? Yes, yeah. Now to my new parents, my new brothers and sisters. You are also our rescuers, and we couldn't have asked for a better family. For all you have done since May 1st of 1997, for taking a sin and treating us like your own, for all the sacrifices. And this one especially for my parents, for not listening to anyone who told you that you're too old to adopt 3 African kids. We thank you for that. Please meet my parents. We also thank you for teaching us how to be kind, how to help those in need whenever possible, and then also teaching us that Mary had a little lamb. And finally, my cousins. You're my family, my friends, my teachers, and my therapists. When I came to America, I was lost, confused, and angry. You showed me that even after tragedy, such as the genocide of 1994 in Rwanda, that I could still smile, that I could still trust, that I could still love, and most of all, that I could still believe in humanity. You taught us how to be kids again. You taught us how to speak English, and most importantly, you taught us how to be there for the ones that you love. And my sister and I couldn't imagine our lives without you in it. Ndahiro, thank you. I don't know if Gabo was here. Gabo, thank you. And the rest of my cousins, thank you. And then to finish off, I just want to thank everyone for allowing me to share my story with you. And that no matter what's happening in your life today, if you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, just always remember that there is hope.
I'd really like to thank Simon for speaking here because this is a difficult topic to speak about in more ways than one. I believe that the firsthand accounts of someone who's actually experienced and endured genocide are the types of narratives that need to be amplified more than anything else. It can be easy, almost to the point of, I believe, being reductive to term everything in academic terms, you know, regarding causes, metrics, charts, and numbers. And they do have their own place and time, but at the end of the day, therein lies the danger of losing sight of the enormity of the impact upon someone's life or that of a family's, someone just like you and me, as we've seen with Simon. And this is why Sonoma State University and the Alliance for Genocide and Holocaust Studies, I thank you for once again inviting us here to talk with you and also to share our perspectives with one another. It's my second time speaking before this lecture series in the capacity of a genocide descendant. And I believe that Sonoma State really has positioned itself as a consistent leader in educating and also producing informed scholars in regards to genocide. Knowing what happens before and educating through testimony is paramount in not just understanding the conditions in which atrocities such as genocides occur, but combined with advocacy and action helps anticipate and identify its future occurrences so no excuses exist any longer to not act as a society when we know what's right and what's wrong. I also thank you as the audience for being here to not just listen, but engage together, because ultimately our stories can no longer just be our own. It needs to be part of our collective identity and collective story. Otherwise, we risk mistakenly believing ourselves infallible, that the problem lies only in others, and it's not a fundamental human condition that we need to be cautious of. So I appreciate and I'm honored to be involved in this dialogue in which greater understanding can be reached, and hopefully help provide some insight in at least a small aspect of this greater genocide narrative. Now, saying that, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is still a difficult topic both to listen to and speak about in various ways. Unlike Simon and his sisters Regine, Denise, she's not here, or even my parents and other extended family and acquaintances who lost most of their loved ones, there's not much frame of reference for fully appreciating those horrors despite being raised in that same time period for me. The only difference was that being born here in America, this was the only home and family that I had ever known. Despite the genocide directly affecting my family, and by extension me, it had happened at such an early age for myself, and I'd say others of this second generation of Rwandan Americans, that it had irrevocably imprinted upon ourselves, on our identities, just like a tattoo. What does it mean that grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and friends, people who should be in your lives, are not? What does it mean to believe that your parents know everything, have life figured out, and are the oldest and wisest adults you know growing up, when in reality they were making a new life for themselves in a new country with no manual on how to raise children in a Western world, in an age where many of us are still just figuring out life? From my standing, what was the frame of reference for an identity that didn't include the genocide? It's almost impossible to decouple one from the other. The genocide against the Tutsi occurred in April 1994. By that time, I was 8 years old. My earliest memories predating that year was something I'd imagined countless immigrant families across this country would find commonality in, and probably many of you in this audience. As children, we were spoken to and understood both the native Kinyarwandan language and English, though of course the former was uncool to speak in public. We were used to standard Rwandan cuisine like yams, beans, ugali, but also couldn't resist some delicious Big Macs and of course great Italian and Chinese food too. Days were spent in school or engaging in classic children's pastimes like exploring new neighborhoods, riding bikes, playing video games, or running around carefree. Though yes, there's also the times of learning traditional Rwandan dances and songs. There was a love of football and the San Francisco 49ers, and also the love of hearing old folk tales from Rwandan myth and legend. The constant and near existential refrain of "where are you from?" and answered every time. Meeting new people was just another layer to this formulation of identity. The idea of being Rwandan and American at the same time, being raised in two different worlds simultaneously, yet organically, since it was the only thing we knew. Due to my age, 1994 in of itself was difficult to recall beyond the increased get-togethers among the parents and the hushed talks. Because even when that bloody April began and the 100 days of slaughter commenced, those of us who were children were shielded from the sheer enormity of the atrocities. Life for us at least would go on, even if those of my counterparts like Simon and his sisters and my aunts and uncles were falling apart on the other side of the world. Despite this, it was impossible to be untouched and not to have our lives changed by genocide, no matter how shielded us fortunate ones were. Meetings rather than get-togethers dominated our social lives. Projects would be initiated to attempt to help survivors still within the country and those who had fled as refugees. This coming in forms of monetary, educational resources, or even providing houses for months or even years at a time. As children, we played in the background while adults grieved and planned over Rwanda's political reality and future. That's what we knew. And one of the most important developments as a response to the genocide was an even greater sense of community. At first, we were only a few families and friends meeting together, but over time, the numbers grew. As a Francophone family at the time, refugees and those leaving the country traditionally went to places such as Belgium, France, or French Canada, but if they didn't remain in Africa. It was due to our small community that a growing presence of not just Rwandans, but those from Burundi, Uganda, and others came to settle around our region, that in Sacramento, which gradually became more of Northern California and eventually throughout the entire state. It became a branch and another chapter in the creation of a Rwandan diaspora, which imparted its own unique voice on the global stage. And it was by no means an insular community either. Our greatest allies were people and institutions such as this, and I believe many projects and initiatives, including my mother's aptly named Friends of Rwanda Association, which Simon mentioned earlier, which helps to provide support and vocational training to widows and orphans of the genocide. All of those would not have been as successful without support from people like you who are not Rwandan, but who are still with us on a very human level. Without them, actually, it would be like trying to grasp water with splayed hands. Without support from the rest of the hands, the water would fall. And without them, the rest of us would have fell. And over time, with the introduction of cousins like Simon and his sisters, our roles became more defined. Simon spoke of how interactions with the family that was here helped aid in his recovery. But for all of us, it was just like gaining new brothers and sisters. In fact, I fully believe we learned more from them growing up than the reverse, and there is no distinction between them and us, labels such as Genocide Survivor and Descendant, because it was our collective trauma and our collective history. It wasn't just that either, because now there were commemorations, which are ritualized memorials every year, which increasingly seem to serve dual purposes, that of remembering and commemorating the fallen, but also to notarize testimony for historical accuracy. This gray lapel I'm wearing right now, this was from last month in DC during the commemoration. It was actually the first one for this year. Increasingly, the roles of genocide descendants have been to take on more of a leadership position in commemorating and leading the discussion in a similar mold that groups such as the Jewish people and Armenians have confronted before them. The genocide against our ethnic group, the Tutsi, was like a splinter branch extending into us, fundamentally transforming our identity in ways I can't hope to understand. It's an existence where understanding that politics is not some theoretical exercise that you can abstain from, but something which has direct application and direct consequences for you and your loved ones, whether you like it or not. It's peeling back the curtain and understanding that action and inaction are their own choices, and you don't have the comfort of ignorance. Words and actions matter more, and the responsibility becomes greater for those of us who can understand what it's like to speak out. To the Armenians, the Jews, the Cambodians, the Tutsi, the Yazidi, Rohingya, and countless more, we owe it to them to listen, to understand, and help amplify their voices. And that's why I'm speaking before you again here today, because as a genocide descendant, I didn't personally undergo the atrocities that both felt and shaped my life. I cannot relate to you the experiences and the stories of survivors like Simon, but it is our duty to help amplify their voices and support them to make this part of our own collective experience. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, or do you want to stand up?
You mentioned you had some help getting to Burundi and some other help in the camps. Can you tell us a little bit about the people that helped you?
Okay. Yes. So yeah, as I mentioned, my sister and I stayed in the swamps around the border, and by that time, you know, all the canoes that were in the river had been destroyed, but there were still people crossing the river. Luckily, I had an uncle that lived nearby, so they're the ones I actually got to help us out. They were in the same situation as we were in. We all stayed in the swamps. There people were looking to kill them as well. But what they did is they had sunk their canoe underwater so it couldn't be destroyed or couldn't be seen. And after we used it, basically they just let it go, and then they were able to help us to get to the camps.
Hi. Just wondering, what are the main problems left in Rwanda, would you say today?
Many problems. Can you make it a little bit, many problems in terms of reconciliation, in terms of, we have issues like many countries. One I can maybe mention in terms of reconciliation and the people coming together. We've done a good job, but at the same time, I think it's a road that new generations have to take, because people understanding our concept, context and understanding where we need to take the country, it's a journey. It's a journey, and it's never done. You know, it's a process. At the same time, the second one, maybe that we didn't mention much, is about even genocide denier. Genocide denier. You know, we have the geopolitical situation we live in. It's not as stable. And genocide ideology didn't die with the end of genocide in Rwanda. And sometimes we find even academic institutions, sometimes we write the history of Rwanda. That's why when I was making a presentation, even the mere fact of naming, you know, saying this is genocide against the Tutsi took a long time. And I think it's not a superficial mode of saying the naming, you know, whether it's Rwanda genocide or genocide against the Tutsi, what's the difference? It's a major difference. Because within the last few years, as a matter of fact, for 10 years, people hid behind Rwanda genocide to talk about a double genocide or to talk about actually that the people who were the victims are the killers. Because when you say Rwanda genocide, what does it mean? So we have that aspect that is being fought, including within the academic institutions. Denial is not about individual deniers. That's not the most dangerous. The most dangerous is the one that has permeated the major institutions. As I said, even the Catholic Church until last year, people didn't want really to take any kind of acknowledgement or responsibility to what happened. And the Pope has opened another door for reconciliation among Rwandans. This was a turning point. So what I'm saying, major institutions still have to face that history and to be able to move forward. So for us to really talk about true reconciliation, it's not individuals among themselves, it's also the understanding of the whole people, the ethos, what happened, you know, to completely eradicate the system of impunity and so on and so forth. But that, I can tell you that the justice system that we initiated, that made the people to face that past has helped tremendously. The rest, if you are looking in general, we are also having, you know, we are educating our people, but Rwanda is a poor nation to begin with. We are at a certain place, we are developing. We have a vision for 2020 where we become a middle-income country, but, you know, when we still have the majority of the people who are not well educated, you know, it's another ball game that I can talk about that is also a major impediment when you talk in terms of, you know, getting to where we want to be as a people. But it's a process, and you are in a good place, yeah. Yes.
First, I just want to thank you for speaking so intimately about difficult experiences. I'm a daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, and I know how hard it is to repeat a painful story many times, but it's so valuable and so necessary. I wanted to ask if I understood you correctly when you said that there's a period of 100 days of mourning that happens in Rwanda now. Did I misunderstand that, to honor the 100 days of the genocide?
Finish the national mourning, usually it's a week, starting with April 7th. But usually it takes 100 days, so it's the 3rd of July that we stop. The 3rd of July. The 4th of July is when we stopped the genocide. That's the official time when genocide was stopped in Rwanda, after 100 days. So the commemorations, even though we did it nationally on the 7th, but throughout the states, for instance, we are still doing commemorations. As a matter of fact, in California, in Sacramento, we have one, I think, on the 8th of June. So we go up to July 3rd for commemoration. The other thing that I would also like to mention, since we are talking about commemoration, talking about also genocide, and I wanted to make you aware of a major conference coming that is an international conference, and I know that Sonoma State is a co-sponsor. That will take place in November. It's an international one that will talk about genocide, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And for people who are willing to present papers, I think they are closing on June. End of June is when we are going to close the acceptance of papers for any subject about genocide and the Holocaust. Yeah.
I was wondering if, given that you are a group of individuals who were both directly and indirectly affected by this genocide, if you could maybe talk a little bit about how the acknowledgement by major institutions of this genocide as a genocide affects your ability to process it or your relationship with the genocide, either personally or politically, just the, like I said, like the acknowledgement of major institutions using the word genocide, validating that it happened, et cetera. How does that interact with your experiences?
It makes a big difference. Let me tell you, it was a major turning point when at the UN on the 13th they accepted to use the word genocide against Tutsi. For many different reasons, including for many people, including ourselves. There was a time people could use whatever. You know, countries are still resisting, including the United States, but they accepted the decision at the UN. Not so much because they don't understand that genocide took place. It's, you know, quite a few, if you ask people in this room, I remember that we, even here at Sonoma, we had a big discussion about it. You know, here at Sonoma, we have a memorial grove. A memorial grove where the, for all the genocide victims, or the genocide that represented, I remember, right? But I remember even in the discussion, we wanted to put genocide against the Tutsi, but what is there is Rwanda genocide, even here. And this is an institution where they teach genocide and Holocaust. But it's not, there was a time, let me give you a little bit of context and history. There was a time people were saying, hey, here you are talking about Rwandan identity. You are trying to get rid of Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa. Why are you mentioning Tutsi? Even in genocide. But already it's a very faulty analysis, because for us to be able to be truly Rwandan, it's to understand also the roots that took us from not being a nation. We have to face that history. We need to face bad history as well. So covering up and saying, oh, it's a Rwanda genocide, so we are not offending someone who has killed or not to be victimized. Naming what happened doesn't take away from people to come together, on the contrary. Because right now what we have done, we've been able to build that kind of collective identity, but we needed also to look at the history collectively at one point or another. You know, history, we have different narratives. I mean, anyone can, as we are here, we're all making history. But what is the history of a nation? But for us, it was even more important, because from a country building perspective, Rwanda is like a baby. You know, 24 years ago, we almost died. And we died for something you can identify. You know, as simple as, even when we discuss about media, media, how do you define free speech versus media of genocide? For us, the media of genocide was tried in Arusha, Tanzania, because it was a weapon. It was like a machete. You know, when you call people to go and kill people and throw them, and you know the medium is the radio, that's what people listen to, it's very important. So for UN to actually accept that is a major step, major. Because when we do that conference in Sacramento, at least I hope that everyone will use the correct terminology. And once you do that, then you can also study, go back and look. You know, no one, but, so that's one thing. Institutions are important, because narratives are propagated through institutions. It's not through one individual voice, or I can go out there, I can talk, but if it's not within the institution, it doesn't really make much difference. That's what I would maybe say about that.
Hi. So I struggle with genocide denial. I struggled with it before I even knew about Rwanda, based on the Holocaust. Do you find that the deniers are people who it didn't touch, or are there people who actually deny that it happened when it happened in their town right in front of their faces?
There are people who tell stories. Let me give you an example. We are doing commemorations throughout the United States. There are young people who never went back to Rwanda, never, for a number of reasons. You know, since their parents came maybe in '94, they were implicated or they are being followed, so they never went back. But also, as I said, there's also a new generation that wants to reconnect to the country. They don't want to stay without having that background. They listen and they hear what Rwanda is doing right now. People are going for tourism, their professors go to Rwanda, they come back. So suddenly these young people are saying, I want to also go back to my country. And we have found this. It has become really, every single state we go to now, or university, people are commemorating. They are doing the commemoration. But the story they tell, so this is what I'm saying, sometimes they do it out of ignorance. Aside from what they have heard from their parents, sometimes, but they want to connect, they say we've killed people. I saw one of the, when I was looking at one of the flyers, there was one flyer with what they call a walk to remember. That walk to remember they put on the flyer was the one of the time when really there was a war, perpetrators running away when RPF was coming in. So for them, that's the walk to remember, they remember. It's not about genocide or anything. So that I can call it maybe by ignorance. But there are other people, the people who have carried the whole genocide ideology, they are open, they talk about it. And then also certain countries protecting themselves because of lack of action during that time. It's easier to explain that genocide didn't happen than saying it happened and then we didn't do anything. Or sometimes we helped. You know, and I'm not here to talk about individual countries because we have merged and we have moved in certain places, but there were countries, with their media, with whatever that was used to actually say that genocide didn't happen. I'm not talking about the US. Thank God. I wouldn't talk about the country, but also I'm not mentioning countries. But it's not just about institutions, it's about the countries that deny. In terms of development, also the ignorance I was talking about, Africa now is coming into other things. For the first time in Africa, you start talking about even what will happen in Rwanda. Before, they didn't care. You know, sometimes they didn't care because it was not within the concept of their lives. So what I'm saying is, genocide denial took on many different forms. It was mostly, when you look at who is driving it, it's through academics and media most of the time, but they are pushing ideas that are out there to begin with. So there was a breeding ground for genocide denial, whether it was within the international community, whether it was within institutions, whether it was within certain people who worked in the country a long time ago. There's a guy who is really, who writes about denial. He's open about it, but he was the one who wrote the constitution of our former president, the one who promoted the genocide. So he lives in Belgium and he has a whole school of people following him because he's a big academic. So what I'm saying is, people do it because it serves their interest, whether it's a political interest, whether it's self-protection, or many different reasons.
And then just to add to what the ambassador was saying, you know, there's no, yes, people do it for different reasons, but for sure, some of them, it's yes, because they did commit genocide. You know, it's yes. I have an example. When I moved to Oregon, I met this guy. You know, I'm a Tutsi, he's a Hutu, but, you know, I try to go past that. You know, what happened, happened. Let's move on with our lives. And down the road, I learned that, you know, when he first got here, he was heavily speaking out that the genocide never happened. So I actually walked up to him and said, hey, you know, I hear these things. I don't want to believe it. I want to hear from you. were you speaking out saying that the genocide never happened? And then he admitted it. But then he told me that his mom was the one that pushed him to do that. And later on I learned that his father was killed because the father went to kill a Tutsi, but the Tutsi was ready. So he ended up getting killed. And for that, they feel they have to speak out against that the genocide never happened. So that's my only example that I have there.
So Simon, and then maybe followed by Mathilde and Ndahiro. Have you been back to Rwanda since you've like moved to Oregon? And if you have you in any way tried to memorialize the death of your parents and the rest of your family?
Yes, I went back 2011. Is that where we went? 2011, and that was 17 years after coming to United States. That was my very first time back. The feelings was mixed emotions. I was happy to be there, but then again, you know, my parents' home, it was no longer there. Everything destroyed. Nothing that I remember was where it was. And then I got a chance to go to my parents' burial to see where they got buried. So that's my only time I've ever been back. I'm hoping to go back again soon. Yeah.
Yeah, we tried, by the way, you know, I mean, genocide for us didn't end. We just discovered 5,000 bodies under a building. You know, someone had built a building. We didn't know where the bodies were. This was last week. So 5,000 bodies in one place. So it's, and we are, you know, people are involved in it. And the sad part was that even after 24 years, there are people who could recognize their people because of the clothes. The clothes, and one was wearing something they had given them for the necklace. And, you know, there were years, I think I shared when I went because of during the Gachacha, someone had said my parents were not where we thought they were. So he said, I know where we put them. That's the Kira talking. So we went back, 2009. We dug the whole hill. It's a hilly where we come from. We didn't find him. We were 200 people digging. We didn't find the bodies. So when we finished, he said, the police came and said, you know, you said you knew where they were. Said, yeah, but I lied. You lied? Why? And he said, why did you believe me then? We came from here, you know, we went and, you know, I had said that I never go back to dig again. That was my, you know, decision before. We went for one more time, you know, saying, let's go. And this guy said he lied. And we found out that the main reason he lied was because he didn't want to get out of prison, because his whole family had left. They had left and he didn't want to get out and face society. He was not ready to come back. So lying, he knew that was going to land him again in whatever, in jail. So and he was about ready to come out of jail during that time. Now he's out, but that was another story. But what I'm saying, because you were asking about the memorization, as a matter of fact, because of all the bodies that were found recently, now in the region, they are doing a big memorial place where they put bodies. So as a matter of fact, they are calling on people coming from there to try to bring, I mean, to contribute, and then they can build something decent where they can put a place where people can go and find them. But as I was mentioning also, maybe Ndahiro will say it, but when we were visiting in 2011 with Simon and many, and all of us were there, it was also when Kimenyi, my husband, had passed away. So it was like a homecoming for him to Rwanda. So we also took the opportunity to do something for the families, you know. And so the place we met was a place where they had put all their relatives. So you find the whole family of, you know, their grandparents, their parents, grandparents, and so on and so forth. So we try. You know, in my own house, we have 70 people buried, and we have a small chapel. So you try whatever you can, you know, to try to have a place where you can, you know, find that place.
Yeah, from my perspective, since what we're talking about, we all went at the same time. Some of my family here, my cousin over there, we all went together in 2011. We stayed for close to a month, and you know, in just this huge house, very close by the Kigali airport. And so, the first time I had ever went to Rwanda was when I was a baby, so I didn't really remember anything. So this was a brand new experience for me. But so I honestly didn't really know how things were like, and I'm sure my brothers and my cousins were thinking the same thing. But to me, like, I definitely felt like this, like the feeling of history in the air, even though you know, going into Kigali, you know, everyone talks about it every year. You know, it's developed more and more. You know, every single time someone goes to Rwanda, they say, have you seen Rwanda? Have you seen like how they're developing, how they're seeing all this stuff? So it may be difficult to really see that, at least in that main city, you know, that it even came from genocide in the first place. But especially if you go into the more rural areas, and yeah, we did do this little memorial one of the days we drove out over there. And you know, I knew that many of my family, they grew up in that area, but just it was pretty, yeah, it was difficult, but it's, yeah, I think it's something that you know, I can't even really put into words, but it's yeah.
Hi, my name is Gabo. I'm one of the cousins that went in 2011. So I'm 1 year younger than Ndahiro, so I was 7 when this happened. One of the things that struck me when we're in Kigali that I think would be great to talk about, not great, but pertinent to talk about at this time. And Mathilde, you mentioned this, as the genocide being a culmination. I think when you go to the museum, one of the things that you see is that this built up, right? This was an exacerbation of divisions that was created between people. And I think we don't learn from history if we're not able to look at this and look at our own lives and look at our own country and look at what are the similarities, what are the things that you saw that helped create this division, where, because the stories that struck me the most and that, like, I still think about to this day are the stories where this guy came and was playing with my baby the day before, then the next day he came and killed my baby, right? Like, what is this dehumanization that happened that allowed this to culminate into this? And are there parallels or things that you're concerned about that you see now that are resonating not just in the States, but around the world, but particularly the States, because we're here. And I think we need to think about where we're at, because if you just think about it as something that's happening over there in a country the size of Colorado, then you don't learn from it. But please.
And I just kind of want to add to what Gabo was just saying. You know, yes, you know, one day this person is coming over and playing with your baby, and then the next day they're coming over to kill your baby. You know, that's why I think most people in the southern states or southern provinces die. You know, we just trust so much in our neighbors, you know, just because of how much time we spent together with those people. You know, we never ever dreamed that, you know, this neighbor could possibly ever harm you. You know, so a lot of people just was under the impression, yeah, if anything happens, even if the war the genocide ever makes it here, I can always count on my neighbor. And obviously that was not the case. People were mistaken, and people just basically flipped the switch and they became this other thing. They were not the person that you knew yesterday.
What you said, Gabo, is very important, because I truly believe once you see the other person as the other, different from you. Because to lead to genocide, the people were called cockroaches. Once you dehumanize a person, then you can kill them. So, but it doesn't, the lessons, I think, of genocide don't just go to genocide. It's also about ostracizing other people in your own midst, because it can happen. When someone, I don't think you can go and target somebody if you see them as human beings like you. And the examples you give are really there. I think as students is also you can't fight against genocide if you don't fight against any kind of, discrimination or other things taking place in your own midst. So I think there's something that is well said in Kinyarwanda. They say before you can go to graze, you have to start near your own house. You think globally, but you act. You start with the local perspective. We are sitting here, but sometimes when you look at the intolerance among people, you talk about intolerance, about ideas, about where you live, about color, about many things. Those can lead up to something. In our situation, it was about ethnicity, ethnic. But you can go and talk about ideology. You can talk about religion. You can talk about many different things, even within the same country. So I think that I think it's to check ourselves, really. You check yourselves. And also to be able to act where you are, because once those stuff are allowed to happen and where you are, there's no way you can stand and say we are fighting against genocide. One thing that, for instance, goes into the same line, the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles, I think they call it the Museum of Tolerance. What I loved about them is that every time, I went a couple of times, and they have trainings. They have trainings even for the police people, policemen who are patrolling in East LA and so on and so forth, because they need to learn how to interact with people, but also they bring other people in the community. Because intolerance doesn't have to be on a global scale, on a big context to call it anything. It starts from really the individual hatred, but also this kind of binary type of way of thinking, we versus them, or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. The first is, I think that especially populations, in this context, we're talking about, genocide survivors. So I believe, people who were affected by the Holocaust, who were affected by the Armenian Genocide, who were affected by the Rwandan Genocide against the Tutsi, Cambodian Genocide, so on and so forth. We're especially sensitive to certain rhetoric that's used, because we recognize how, just through history, how it's developed to, culminate in a genocide. So when we see certain rhetoric, in society right now, whether it's here or whether it's abroad, I believe we especially take note of that, and whereas I believe others who probably don't have that perspective or the empathy probably feel that, it's just overblown. But that's one thing. So whether we really key in on those types of rhetoric, and just because like we know where that leads to. If you hear things about refugees coming to kill you or take your jobs. My cousin Simon was a refugee. My aunts, uncles were refugees. My cousins were refugees. So, I talked about it earlier. I talked about it earlier in regards to, as a genocide descendant, but actually as someone who just keep yourself informed, such as everyone here, because you're participating. You don't have the luxury of ignorance. You don't have the luxury of saying, oh, I'm apolitical, because at the end of the day, no, actually politics, it affects you. You may think you're apolitical, and things like that, but that's speaking from luxury. Like, it's speaking from a perspective that doesn't understand the real world, that you think that you're separate from everyone else to the extent that those types of problems could never affect you. It can never come over here. You think, oh, genocide can never come to the United States. Well, it happened with the Native Americans. There's many different things where you just acknowledge it, especially, we're part of the affected populations, and we're just speaking in regards to genocide, but there's many different types of aspects that go into that. I'm not trying to get political, but like, you have to, at the end of the day, like, you are political in some aspect, because, even just saying, get the government out of here is a political statement, so I do believe it's something where you have to just be really self-aware, and just like understand that, those problems that are happening out there, they can happen over here too. We're all humans, so it's just because you think that they're separate doesn't mean those types of problems would never come here. So that's why I believe forums like this are important, just to get a perspective on all these different dialogues, and just so people could understand, maybe they could take away like, hey, I've seen what's led to what the genocide happened in Rwanda. I've seen what happened during the Holocaust. I've examined that, I've looked at that, and if you're looking at, you could find parallels to anything, but at the very least you could figure out, hey, at least let me take note of this. Maybe I could learn lessons. So, it's far easier to learn from other people's mistakes than, learning from your own. So, I do think that, yeah, that's a very important point you brought up. And at the end of the day, like, we all have to take note and understand that we all have that capability. We all have this potential for these bad things to happen, but just be cognizant of that.
Hi, thank you for coming and sharing. I'm wondering to the ambassador, so, and someone mentioned in terms of the Rohingya, so it's not like this is not happening somewhere in the world. And I'm wondering, what has the UN learned from what happened in Rwanda and what's happening with the Rohingya?
I really, it's the news that you are getting. I follow, and I know it will be hard for me to talk about it. Maybe you know even more. I wouldn't, right? Eh? So the question is, what is happening with Rohingya? Yeah, even the thing the fight against genocide is a relentless fight. but also it's one of the toughest because I think genocide, human genocide started with Adam and Eve. Quite frankly, you can find throughout history elements of genocide that took place, even though maybe they were not defined as such, but they happened. So, but one of the major developments, especially coming out of even genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, that is, has it stopped the genocide because it happened? You know, after the Holocaust, people said never again. Rwanda happened. You know, the Armenia had happened way before. So all those stuff are still happening, but there are a number of developments that I would like to mention, maybe that came out of, at least that is in the debate. Like this whole idea about the responsibility to protect. The responsibility to protect, that has been, I think, handicapped by political, discussions, but that was exactly that. Because people are afraid that if you intervene in certain situations, it might be seen as a regime change. So quite a few people don't subscribe to the notion of responsibility to protect in many instances. The other thing that was developed, like what I was talking about, that is called the Kigali Principles. It's continuing. The Kigali Principles is not, it's just because that's where it was signed. It was not by Kigali, by all means. Many countries came together, and they, after a series of meetings and meetings and meetings, they agreed that they have about 18 principles that need to be implemented wherever there's a place of conflict, where you know that genocide has been defined. You know, this is a place where genocide is taking place. Those 18 principles, I would like to share them, to share with you. Don't have them, but one of it is just to protect the civilians at all costs. You know, so they have a set of principles that would make a different situation like the one that took place in Rwanda, when people were dying in front of the UN, you know, when it was there. So that's one thing. Just recently, something happened too. Now when you define genocide, for instance, a commission of rape also emerged from out of genocide in Rwanda. It was the whole trial in Tanzania when they did the ICTR, International Tribunal for Rwanda. The women were able to, they are the ones who went there. They were able to push for the idea that when you commit rape is a weapon of genocide. It's a genocide because you destroy society by starting with rape. You know, you are disabling society even by doing that, but also the victimization of women and the attendant thing. This was the first also. So slowly but surely they are bringing those new concepts that are solidifying that. Now, I have to agree with you that, you know, there are many places where what you might call genocide, they are still occurring on our watch. You know, and who is, and once again, sometimes you are, how would I say it? We are kept by political machinations, by many different things of why people wouldn't intervene, or because of many political reasons, balancing of powers in certain places. But that's another thing. And I don't think it will bring us closer to ending genocide. That's why I'm saying sometimes when, even as we talk about hope, you know, we are talking about hope. You know, how can we stop genocide? Is it going to stop? I'm not here to say it won't, because at one point, even the willingness of our people stopped it themselves, even in front of the failure of the international community. Genocide in Rwanda stopped because of Rwandans themselves. Really. And that's, people can deny anything, but that's a historical thing you can't deny. They stopped the genocide. The few who survived, it's because some people stopped it, not the UN. So what I'm saying, what are the mechanisms needed to stop that? What I have seen, for instance, on the case of Africa, where I can talk at least with a little bit of certainty because of the connection, is that they are also creating a mechanism on the continent a ready to act force that can help in those situations. But we have problems on our own in Africa as well. You know, I mean, to come together as a continent to be able to stem or to stop a genocide won't be as easy as it was not for UN. You know, but what I'm saying, at least there was a little bit of, we have stopped to be what I call, you know, aspirational. We have started to become operational. It's still weak, but I think it's a march that we are going to continue to take. Maybe act on, you know, regional basis and then go to where you can manage, but we are still continuing to try to see that mass killings are not happening in our midst, where we are. You know, but at the end of the day, it's all of us coming together to be able to do that. But yeah, I can't. Your question is the question I ask myself, but I tried. In genocide, I think we go beyond taboos. You know, the taboos are broken. The rules, the morals, the ethos of the people is broken. Actually, it's better, at the end of the day, it's better maybe to, you know, if something had come and killed all the people in Rwanda, but by natural stuff, we would have recovered faster. Really, because rebuilding a nation, you know, it depends. If you have a little money here and there, you can start rebuilding the roads, the whatever, what we are proud of in a socioeconomic building. But it's rebuilding the trust, you know. How do you trust again? Even sometimes for us, it was also families. Sometimes if you married somebody from another ethnic group, I know someone who's married to my cousin. She was a Hutu, he was a Tutsi. They had 5 children. I think I told you this story. And then when they were teachers, both were teachers, the husband and wife. So when the genocide started, the wife said, let me take you to my parents because you'll be protected by my brothers and my mom. The father had died. Well, guess what? She took the husband and the children, and they were all killed by the brothers. So even now, her whole life has been to bring the brothers to justice. They were hiding in Congo, she was able to bring them. But when we talk about that, so that's the recovery. How do you recover from that? How do you trust again? You know, how are you going to say now, really, these people, we can live together? It's a journey, but Rwanda has done it in a sense that what we did was to the people themselves. There's the centrality of our people. They have to come up with those, and it's multidimensional. You know, they come from everywhere. Those people who go to Moganda, who do stuff together, the people in the church, even though many people died in church, but many people are still attending church. So within the church, within families, some made by government, civic instruction, all those stuff are coming together to try. Even in foreign countries where we are, even here. Even here, you know, the small time I spend, I'm not in Washington, I'm in the States, to meet with our young people who are still traumatized, who don't want to go back or who are trying to go back. All these are people who are trying to make sense of what happened to Rwanda, because the taboos were broken. There was nothing sacred, including the family. So I think when you say, how do you even think about that? It's one of the, you know, we dehumanized our humanity, that's about it. You know, it became something else in that time.
Have a hard time understanding about the healing process for Rwanda or the Gacaca courts, where you bring in people who may have slaughtered someone in your own family, and you determine what an appropriate sentence would be, which to my understanding in most cases would seem fairly lenient by other nation standards. They serve their time and they come out and then they're walking the streets next to you. You see them on a daily basis. I can't think of too many societies where that would work. And I'm wondering why and how did it work in Rwanda? How can you trust those people ever again? How can you heal when they're right there among you?
I think that the Gacaca, the court, actually allowed us to be this, you know, the prerequisite to anything was justice, to any kind of reconciliation, whether the justice was imperfect, because there's no place where you can find a perfect justice. What happened was that we had 1 million people dead. You had 3 million who were implicated in the killings. It was a nation of 7 million people. The majority had left the country because they went to Congo. Even today, we still have issues with the country because the majority took their weapons, took their computer, took their wives, not the wives, but I forgot what I was going to say. They took everything. They went to the camps in Congo where they organized because, as I said, they also exported the whole ideology. They wanted to come back. That's why Rwanda was at war with Congo twice, because they had put them at the border with Rwanda. And what happened was that to push them inside or to bring them. But also we engaged in repatriation, very big. We brought back 2 million people. And it was by intention, because we said, number one, you have to really go beyond your own personal likes and dislikes. We had to, for instance, abandon the death penalty, because if we had continued with the death penalty, everyone, you know, how are you going to do it? So what we did was to bring them back, and then to restore the justice system that was traditional, but it was enhanced with the teaching. Actually, there are some academic institutions that were even, that will come, even from here. But they put the crime, and then they ranked the crimes. You know, it took a long time, and then they also trained the people of integrity in all groups who will come and be the judges, who were selected by the people themselves. So in each jurisdiction, in each village, every Saturday you find people under the tree. That's why they call it gacaca, on the grass. And they would listen to the people coming to convict, to bring their grievances. And then the people would also render the judgment. So the judgment was done in, so they had classified, for instance, if you killed 10 people, you destroyed the property, you raped. So all those stuff had different categories, but also the penalty that will go with this. But gacaca, even though it was going to make people accountable to the whatever, it also gave them a chance to be able to regret what they have done, because the majority also were ready to do what they did. And once they did, and they regretted, but also willing to pay back, like for now, what they call TIJ, it's like works for people who are not in jail anymore, but who can work for survivors of genocide, like the widows. They come and build the houses within that program. So there were some lenient thing, because we were thinking in terms of restorative justice, not highly punitive justice. It was to bring people back to build. And then it was complemented by other programs. It was not just to do the justice and leave it there, because obviously, I tell you at the beginning myself, I told you the case of someone who put us on a goose, chase. But they also did community type of investment, what they call the economic leverage that I talked about last time, called the 1 cow per child, per family. If you had a very poor family, you gave them a cow, but they had to give it to your neighbor. So it brought people together, because a cow is also for friendship. It's not just for economic thing. So we created some kind of socio-economic initiative that will also bring people together, that will complement the gacaca. The justice was done. We closed the gacaca courts a few years ago. All the cases. Now if we go to Rwanda and we had people in genocide, Holocaust in Washington, D.C., they went there. You can go and open a case, and I can find, for instance, the case about their parents, my parents. They say who have killed them, what happened to the killers, what happened. So that has allowed the Rwandans to move forward. So that justice was important. If we had used the justice system like the one used here, they said that it could have taken 100 years just to look at the cases, not even to judge. Because there were no lawyers, the judges had died, who was going to judge them? Even Rwanda didn't even have one prison, no prison. So you are talking about a country where you had to recreate everything almost from scratch. The international tribunal that was put by UN in Arusha, Tanzania, it judged, I think, maybe 9 cases, just 9 cases. Even now they still have what they call residual mechanism. They are still doing the cases at a cost of $5 billion or more. The gacaca courts in Rwanda were at $2 million and they judged everybody, and we are able to move forward. Yeah, of course there are people who didn't pay what they should have paid. Yeah, you know, to kill somebody is something very great, but we were thinking in terms of nation building. Really, that was the primary thing. And you had to go, it's when we went beyond the human equation of, you know, exacting revenge or doing stuff. We needed to build. And then to say, you pay, you account for what you have done, you come back to society, and then you help us to build. As a matter of fact, if you go to Rwanda and you look at some of the young people now who teach against genocide, most of them, and I hope that eventually you invite one, he's a son of one of the worst genocidaires. But he's looked at what his parents have done, and he looks at his friends now. And he's saying, this is something we are going to fight until we get there. We have the young people. We have the women who have helped in restoring the, you know, our nation to a semblance of working at the beginning. These are people who are pushing reconciliation and who are pushing all the